In the search for land, some are now farming the plains area around the mountain. But this area is the most vulnerable to climate change. The temperature is rising, and the water tower, the mountain, is supplying less water.
In this lowland, the problem here it is water. We don't have irrigation channel because of the way. There is no way of bringing the irrigation channel around here. And bananas which it is planted here, it is dependent on rain. That's why you can see them that they are not healthy.
As farm holdings become smaller, at some point it becomes untenable to continue to treat that as a farm or to make your living off of that as a farm. So you move on to other livelihood options. Some of those options mean you go and cut down forest, or you move on to more marginal land and begin cultivating there. And again, they're farming with no agricultural inputs, so that it's basically mining the soil.
What these farmers on the marginal land will need is crops that yield greater bounty and are resilient to climate change. The International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropics, ICRISAT, has its headquarters for Eastern and Southern Africa in Kenya. Their aim? To bring science to the aid of agriculture. They are interbreeding crops to increase yield, increasing tolerance to changes in climate, and increasing resistance to pests and diseases. Saeed Salim and Estance Guata are checking a trial planting of pigeon pea, the slit grain similar to lentils. They believe it has great potential for this part of Africa.
Yeah, and in our breeding program at the moment we have 3 different types of pigeon pea, namely the short duration type, which as we can see is already maturing, and the second type, which is medium duration, is only flowering at the moment, as we can see, and the third type, which is the long duration type, is not yet even started flowering.
Short duration is for monocropping, but people with resources, because if you can see here, if you cannot control pests, resource-poor farmers cannot, then they cannot grow it. It is for people with resources, that is rich farmers.
One of the main things we are breeding for is the seed characteristics. They have to meet the local market qualities, namely bold seededness, and the seed color has to be white.
And they have to cook also fast.
And also the time to cook has to be fast.
The biggest market is in India, where they take about 80% of the requirements here, and then the niche market in Europe, particularly in UK. The window for Indian subcontinent is between May
and November.
November.
Yeah.
And then we are at advantage because at that time their crop is still in the field.
And the demand is very high. Therefore, they can fetch very high prices.
Conventional interbreeding takes time. Advances in molecular biology now allows for crops to be altered at the genetic level.
What we do is to look for genes that confer a particular trait to local varieties. The process starts from DNA extraction. The best quality DNA is normally extracted from fresh leaf material. This is a genome grinder. It is possible to put almost 200 leaf samples in this genome grinder, and the leaf samples are ground and then taken to the next process. After the DNA has been extracted, we then take it through the process of what we call amplification. And finally, we are able to detect whether the gene that confers a particular trait is there or not. And if the gene is there, we then cross the plant that has got that gene with the locally adapted variety, and then check whether the trait has been incorporated. Laboratories like these are very, very important in the future of Africa, because through biotechnology applications, we are able to develop varieties that are locally adapted to the environmental conditions, that are high yielding, that are resistant to diseases within a much shorter time compared to conventional breeding.
Breeding locally adapted crops is just a start. Knowing the likely weather pattern for the coming season is crucial.
We would observe like our grandparents. They would observe trees, would observe clouds, would observe the moon, and sometimes Actually, those ones were not quite accurate.
One of the major problems we have in this area is the high variability in the climate. And with the expected changes in climate, the variability is expected to increase further. So we are trying to improve the farmers' decision making by giving them the expected conditions for the coming seasons. That is the forecast.
But now, after learning the use of forecast, and most especially the 3 months forecast just before the rainfall, we are able to know how much rain is going to come that season. Or most especially the probability, not the exact, the probability.
The impact of climate change is already being felt across East Africa. People's livelihoods are under threat from rising temperatures, drought and erratic rainfall patterns. Adapting to these changes can help protect livelihoods. But will the scale of the problem outweigh the available resources?
Africa today is a continent in which we can already observe the impacts of climate change. It has really made no contribution to it, and yet is, in a sense, also least prepared to cope with it.
The search for solutions to climate change continues. While the loss of the snows may be inevitable, the livelihoods of the people of East Africa hang in the balance.